origins of COVID-19. Now Republican Congressman Steve Scalise and James Comer are once again calling on House Democrats to initiate an investigation and hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable. Quote, "We renew our request that you immediately convene hearings to examine the origins of COVID-19, the possibility that it leaked from a CCP-controlled laboratory, and any involvement of U.S. taxpayer funds." Let's talk about that with former Biden campaign surrogate Kevin Walling. Fox News medical contributor Dr. Janette Nesheiwat and RNC national spokesperson Paris Denard. Great to have you all back with us tonight.
Hey, Shannon.
Hey, Shannon. Good to be with you.
Okay, I want to play something from Dr. Fauci today, talking about some of the emails, what he could remember, what he didn't remember, the redactions. Here's a little bit of that back and forth.
But to be clear, you're saying you don't remember, or you can't tell us what was in the body of that exchange.
I don't remember what's in that redacted, but the idea, I think, is quite far-fetched that the Chinese deliberately engineered something so that they could kill themselves as well as other people. I think that's a bit far out, John.
But Paris, that seems to be confusing the matter a little bit, because that's not what most people are upset about now. What they're saying is the potential that it leaked in an accident from the Wuhan lab is something they feel was shut down early. To say, oh, it's crazy talk about engineering a weapon, that's not what people are saying.
You're right, Shannon. And look, it's funny how Dr. Fauci can't remember what he put in his emails, but he was able to remember enough to write an entire book during COVID-19. Ultimately, too many people have died, too many dreams have been shattered, too many jobs have been lost, and just businesses destroyed because of this COVID-19. So we need to get to the bottom of it. Dr. Fauci needs to be transparent, be held accountable for the things that he said in his emails and the things that he said publicly and the things that he might have said privately to the President of the United States. Trust is being eroded in Dr. Fauci and other people because of it seems to be a double standard, hypocrisy, and a cover-up.
Well, and it's not to say that there aren't some people who are raising a question or have thrown out there this theory about bioengineering a weapon. That's not what the current conversation, though, is about. It's about the leak and why that was shut down as something that was a potentially viable theory early on. Real Clear Politics says this: fact checkers should avoid the temptation to treat claims around scientific theories, which are by their nature opinions, as matters of plain and objective fact. Scientific questions are settled not through derision, but through open debate and an honest examination of the evidence, which, Kevin, it sounds like most folks out there now say that is what they want, but many of them are saying they were shut down or shot down when they tried to raise these questions a year ago.
Which is hugely problematic, Shannon, and that's why I was encouraged to see President Biden in a statement last week give a 90-day assignment to our intelligence communities, to national labs, to get to the bottom of the origins of this pandemic, not just to honor the 600,000 dead Americans and their memory, but to prevent this from ever happening again. So you see a whole of government approach by this Biden administration taking a tough stand with China, demanding a new investigation into these origins because there are so many questions. And to your point, Shannon, now the evidence is clear that it's one of two options, whether it was an animal to human transfer in terms of this gain of action investigations that were going, this lab work that was going on, or something that came from the lab in a leak that was, to your point, not necessarily malicious on behalf of the Chinese government, but something that they're not willing to share openly in the world stage. They are the problem here in this equation. The Chinese communist regime and this administration needs to hold them to account.
And we'll see, because there are numerous investigations going at the international level. There are calls for us as the U.S. to take the lead on some of these investigations as much as we can with, more than a year past and probably a lot of data no longer available. And people who are afraid to talk. I mean, clearly we're asking a lot of these Chinese scientists and doctors and people who are directly involved who do not face the same kinds of threats that we do here for speaking openly. So we have to understand that is, of course, part of the equation as well. Luckily, we have a doctor here with us who has talked about these things and looked into these things and treated these patients. And doctor, I think you probably had some experience last year with raising some of these questions and being shut down.
Yeah, I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, I had just finished an interview with Steve Hilton, and I had the opportunity to speak with a virologist and an epidemiologist because I'm not a virologist or an epidemiologist, but I've taken care of hundreds of COVID patients. And they immediately said, no, unlikely. It's from bats, it's from camels, it's from cats. So I let it go. But that was always in the back of my mind. And I tell you, Shannon, I've taken care of hundreds and hundreds of COVID patients this past year. And it's disappointing and quite disturbing if any withheld information resulted in the lives of patients. But, it's important that we don't speculate. It's important that we take this opportunity to ensure that an in-depth, detailed, and thorough investigation is conducted to see exactly what transpired in Wuhan. Could it be that, there was a breach of safety protocols that resulted in the spread of this virus? Possibly. We don't know. But what we do know, Shannon, is that there were 3 scientists, 3 researchers from the Wuhan Institute that had infections similar to COVID right before the outbreak. And the CDC US was not allowed access to that information. We weren't allowed access to the lab. We weren't allowed access to raw data and the sample specimens. Why? If I'm in a sinking ship, I want help. Why not reach out? So those are the questions that we really need to take a closer look at.
Well, in Paris, there's talk of asking Dr. Fauci to come back to Capitol Hill to talk again under oath to a number of lawmakers about questions they have now that they've seen his emails and learned a lot more about the conversations that were ongoing. Do you think lawmakers will go through with that and in a bipartisan fashion, Paris?
That's a very good question, and this should be a bipartisan issue. Getting to the heart of the matter should not be partisan. We should have Democrats lined up wanting to hold Dr. Fauci accountable just as much as Republicans want to right now. We should have Democrats lined up to hold the Biden administration accountable just as much as we want to have Republicans do the same, because this issue is too important. And what we see is Dr. Fauci was saying one thing and typing another while in his emails, and we'll see what he says in his book. But ultimately, we've got to have answers, and this should not be made into a partisan issue.
Very quickly, Kevin, do you think Democrats will agree to call him back?
I think Democrats should agree to call back all of the key principals around the table. Deborah Birx, Robert Redfield, Anthony Fauci as well, Admiral Brett Giroir, others that were at that table with President Trump while this was going on in this past year to get to the bottom of some of the initial thinking with regards to the origins of this disease.
Okay, we'll see if they do it. And listen, if Robert Redford shows up, I'm probably going to go, mask and all, to check it out myself. All right, panel, thank you very much. Good to see all of you.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thanks, Shannon.
We're getting news.